Welcome back to Fast Market here on the Schwab Network. It's time for our cash tag segment. For that, let's bring in Megan Brantley. She's the Vice President of Research at LikeFolio. Welcome back to the show, Megan.
Thanks for having me, guys. It's good to be here.
All right. Happy Friday to you, Megan. We're talking Unity Software. This is a name that we typically don't cover on this show. It's been relatively volatile over the last several weeks. They're involved in a leading platform for software development. A lot of developers involved in here. They announced a pricing plan. They had to backtrack on that, so we've seen some additional moves in the shares, down about 10% this month. But what kind of data do you have on a company like this?
Yeah, so Unity is a game engine that we've been tracking for some time. It's supported by a lot of tailwinds from gaming to VR to AI. So it's got its hands in a lot of the big buzzwords that we've seen over the last 2 years. And recently they announced a runtime fee. And so what this would mean is starting in January, it would impact games and how many, a charge when they were installed once this installs crossed a certain threshold. And in the background for Unity is this was really a company that catered to a lot of indie developers, but its software foundation was so good that a lot of larger games were using it to build as well. One that's popular that's top of mind is Pokemon Go. And so what Unity has had to do is kind of backtrack and say, okay, we're only, implementing this fee for these really large games whenever installs cross a certain threshold. I think it's 200,000, and once revenue hits a certain point, and they've received such big backlash that they had to kind of make some concessions, including, and quell some fears from developers who are worried about, install bombing or things of that nature. So what you have, though, is a really, really upset user base. And you can see this unfold in our data real time. I think this is really where LikeFolio's data shines, is because on the date of this announcement, sentiment plunged from about 80% positive, which is really, really high in our universe, especially in the tech field, down as low as, I think it was around 18% positive. So that's over a 60-point fall just in a matter of days. Obviously, though, since then, you can see it starting to tick back up. So for us, this is a really good gut check and litmus check of has Unity really alienated a lot of users and pushed them away forever? Or is this a flash in the pan type of event, and have those concessions been well accepted by developers? So far for our data, this is a pretty nice recovery. This is pretty strong. We've already seen sentiment back near 60% positive, still much lower than that 80% that we saw before this announcement, but it is nice to see some recovery. We saw a huge spike in mentions. We saw a huge spike in web visits. And so this is definitely something that we're monitoring, but this is, the major cause for that pullback that we've witnessed over the last week.
Megan, if you read articles on this company, a lot of the talking points are negative, like the Apple privacy and some insider selling and the pricing that Tom was talking about, and the fact that Apple's headsets are too expensive and they may not draw the interest. But your data shows something really not reflected in the stock, which means if this is recovering, if your data shows recovering, you may be ahead of the curve here. Correct me if I'm wrong. You may be ahead of the curve, showing a returning strength in this name.
Yeah, that's kind of what it's looking like on our data. And one event that we like to compare this to is Snapchat. And I don't know if you guys remember, a couple of years ago in 2018, Snapchat released an update that was hated by users, and users actually fled the platform for a long time, and the stock had a really hard time. It took a long time for Snapchat to recover from that event, from that purge. And what we're seeing with Unity is the company was quick to react to user judgment and user concerns over this new update. They've been responsive. They've made some concessions, and we're starting to see that sentiment normalize quicker than we have in other, these typically conflict events, these crisis events. And so this is definitely something we still want to see some stabilization, but whenever you look at sentiment, whenever you look at mentions, and whenever you consider just how valuable Unity's platform was, 80% positive is really high sentiment in our universe and higher than other peers of its sort. And so this is a name that prior to this event, we were really bullish on, and this pullback, especially long-term, could be a gift for long-term investors if Unity can pull this off and can retain these users and can start, this is a good sign for diversified revenue if it can hang on to this user base and actually start to collecting another stream of revenue from this move.
Yeah, they're going to probably overhaul this pricing plan. I'm hearing they're still probably going to implement something on this. But Megan, when you look at data on a company like Unity, and it's not one of those top tier names that's in the headlines every day, but it's really volatile. It's really been a popular trading product for traders right now at this point. But the people that are doing this, the developers that are the ones out there on social media, they're really active, it seems like. Do you see like the massive inflows on something like this, or is this one of those names that you typically see a lot of social media data on, just due to the fact that it's a group that probably is in tune with the social media aspect of it?
Yeah, we actually have a pretty decent mention volume and sample size. Developers really like to talk about Unity. And also this caters to a lot of these kind of indie developers, and a lot of games that are these initially free-to-play games use Unity as a game engine. And I think that that's partially why that sentiment was so high, is that they provide a really strong software foundation for games to be developed upon. I mean, I think it speaks to a lot that even a game as popular as Pokemon Go uses something like a Unity game engine. And so I think it's going to be really important that Unity's sentiment, that it's able to continue to keep these developers happy and that it continues to be a go-to. One thing that we're watching are these switching mentions from users who are developers who are talking about switching from using Unity to another game engine. We're tracking Unreal Engine, we're tracking Godot. So far, it seems that Godot, which is a free game engine option, it did spike during this event. But I think what's really going to be important for us, at least, is to see that stabilization, to see those usage mentions stabilize, to see that sentiment stabilize and mention buzz stabilize. So far, we are seeing signs of stabilization, which I think is a positive sign long term.
All right, great stuff. Great data as always, Megan. Appreciate it. Have a great weekend.
Thanks, guys. You too.
All right, that's Megan Brantley, Vice President of Research at LikeFolio, breaking down Unity software. Kev, as I mentioned,